Whoa, that's new. It's kind of creepy. Okay, so Siri or whatever she is, we're recording now. So now it's official. Thanks for the intro, Dennis, and thanks, Andy, for translating. I'm just for the people, first time. My voice has been translated in sign language. I recently also found out that there's multiple sign languages. How confusing. Anyhow, today although it looks like I'm in the forest, but I'm actually in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. And I'm going to be talking about the importance of homestyle cultivation, creating relationships with your sacred mushrooms or all kind of mushrooms. And yeah, Dennis, whenever you're ready, I can start my presentation that I kind of threw together. So don't judge me for weird pictures. Also, disclaimer, I did not ask any permission for all the pictures I've been using. So I just say sorry up front to all people's pictures I've been using. And I've used a lot of my own pictures in the meanwhile. So if you're ready, Dennis, I'm ready. We can get into this.
I'm absolutely ready. And yeah, just if anybody has a question, drop it in the chat. Thanks for dropping where you're from, and off to the races. Jasper, can't wait for this.
Boom. So I'm sharing the screen now. Click present. Look at this. Here we are. Fungi Academy. Well, that's what we are. And I feel so honored to be here among so many great thinkers and minds and hearts and people that are here in service of the mushroom and in support of the mushroom. And I always feel that the mushroom that you don't really choose to work with the mushroom. I feel the mushroom chooses their people. And it's a thought that a lot of people share with me. And I also personally share with them myself. It never was my intention to become a mycologist or a teacher or like even a mass scale oyster mushroom farmer, what we're currently setting up. But the mushrooms had a different path. And I got to Fungi Academy about 3 years ago. I actually tried to hitchhike from Seattle all the way to Ecuador in the mountains of Oaxaca. I saw this beautiful logo. It was already in existence. And I was like, man, this sounds like my project. Then I arrived to the Fungi Academy, and then I got locked out of my PayPal. I didn't have any other way to finance myself. So the universe was just like, you got to be here. And I have it all to thank to one man. I would like to honor this presentation for my brother, my partner in philosophy, my mentor, my business partner, Oliver Merivey. Oliver has been an inspiration for many in the field. He's been working with the sacred mushrooms for over 6 years, and unfortunately we lost him on Christmas morning 2020. He's been a tremendous important figure in my life. Without him, I wouldn't have been here and carrying on his fire and his mission. And yeah, he's dearly missed. But the only thing we can do is like carry on his fire that he has in his hair as well in this picture. So yeah, this man he had really believed that the mushrooms had the power and have the power to heal the world, but not only heal the world, but also make us thrive. And how he saw this is that we're not only here to get healed and then it's okay, how can we become the best version of ourselves and make the biggest impact in our lives and find the path of our dharma, or how some people call it, or our ikigai, as some people in Japan call it. And he was really for this. So if there's already a question, Dennis, you can just like drop them in. I'm happy to get out of the flow and answer questions, because we're all in this together. We're the mycelium. We consistently have to be communicating.
Sure, we had a question. I don't know if you want to answer, but somebody asked how he passed.
I do not want to disclose this in this moment, but thanks for your interest, at least. So there's a bunch of mushrooms growing. They make me very happy. I've been doing this for about 10 years. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I am from the Netherlands. And the Netherlands, this shit is legal to grow them. At least it was for a long time. The legislation here is so chill, and I'm so blessed to be from the Netherlands that my first experiences were not with the sacred mushroom or the sacred truffle. I'll show you guys a bit about that soon. But I was always really relaxed. I was relaxed doing it in public. I was relaxed talking to cops. My first trip, my mom called me and I picked up and I was just like, yo, Mom, we just had some truffles. It's pretty fun. We're just in the forest. And she's like, well, kids being kids. And I really feel that like a legal landscape like we have in the Netherlands, or at least a tolerated landscape, is a major benefactor of people having positive experiences. I, for some reason, in my 18-year-old mind, like to go to supermarkets because the colors were so bright. And one time I took my friend and he was just cracking up looking at like some dishwashing soap or whatever. And like this lady walked up to me and like I was looking at him, I was also laughing. She was just like, is he all right? And I was like, yeah, I just had some truffles. So she's like, okay. And she went on with her day. And nobody had a challenging experience. Nobody had the cops called them. Nobody freaked out. And I really believe that everybody in the world should have these experiences. And for a lot of us Dutchies, this happened in smart shops. This is one of the touristy smart shops in the Netherlands. You see a beautiful mushroom, you see seeds, there's neon mushrooms, there's a cactus. This is definitely one of the tourist traps. This is definitely not something I personally would want to walk into. And they do not sell cannabis here. So cannabis is being sold in coffee shops. In the Netherlands, we have smart shops for right now truffles, magic mushroom grow kits, cacti, so you can buy peyote and San Pedro if you'd like and grow them in your own home. You can buy research chemicals like 4-FA, 6-APB. If anybody read Drug Use for Grown-Ups by Dr. Carl Hart, I highly recommend it. He has a great part about 6-APB. And this is, until recently, you could buy 2CB. It's really like the place if you are a psychonaut to go on these endeavors. I don't like this one particularly, but I like this one. This is Cocopelli. This is a little bit more intentional. It's a little bit more hidden. It's a little bit more spiritual. And the staff here has lots of good advice and really great knowledge on these medicines that people can be journeying with. And they also have a nice space if you want to journey there potentially, which I would never encourage. I would definitely encourage in a place where you feel in nature or in your own home instead of a store that people walk in and out. But hey, who am I to judge? So we're talking about a little bit about these things that you can buy, right? And this is for the people that have never been to the Netherlands and are expecting sacred mushrooms to be sold in stores. You can kind of expect something here on the left. So we have high Hawaiians. They got 6 planets, guys, 6 planets of strength. And read the flyer. And then there's Dragon's Dynamite. So as you can see, it's really, it's really advertised in a crazy way. And for the consumer and for somebody to, just buy it depending on the packaging, which I think is, if we're talking about a sacrament, about a thing that can make us heal and technology and being that we want to commune with, that's, I think I've always found these packaging very funny, and I'm very curious to see how this is evolving in the legal landscape in North America mainly. And, you can not only buy sacred or like high Hawaiian psilocybe tampelinida magic truffles, but you can also buy these research chemicals if you want to, which are obviously not truffles, but I think it's a great way to show us like what is capable in the Netherlands and what happens when legislation is not focused on criminalizing users and really taking care of the health benefits. So in the Netherlands, I don't know if this is maybe in the way of sharing my screen. Here we go. So you used to sell these fresh magic mushrooms, the sacred mushrooms. Drying them was always seen as processing them, and somehow that was illegal, but selling them fresh was okay. So according to data I've encountered, 500,000 doses were sold every year. And these are obviously, this is a weird statistics. As you can see, the first smart shop I saw, kind of shady. A lot of these handlings are cash. So it could have potentially been way more, but let's just say 500,000 of these were sold annually. And over 2 years, from 2004 to 2006, there was only 148 hospital cases in all of the Netherlands, and thereof were 134 were foreigners. And even all the papers I read had to note that most of them were British. So if you're a Brit, you know your people, you know yourself. No, I'm not doing any call outs here. But I think that's a very interesting statistic that over 2 years, over 1 million of these portions were sold in these 2 years. Only 14 Dutch people ended up in the hospital. This already shows that these substances, this technology, these beings are extremely safe. to work with. And there's still some guidelines that we have to take into account. And one of the reasons why I think actually this criminalization or this ban on the sale thereof has been something positive is because you end up going into these factors, like impulse purchases. This happens a lot with tourists. They're in Amsterdam anyway. You can buy shrooms. Let's buy some shrooms. I'm drunk. I've had cocaine. I've had MDMA or any of these legal research chemicals I just mentioned. I'm just going to take them anyway. That's obviously not what like the right conditions. And you know, a lot of these people will then walk the streets of Amsterdam or the red light districts on, I don't know, 4 grams of mushrooms. It's not a good time. It can be, maybe, but like I think most people will not have a good time. And I think a lot of the people, since it's legal, they also underestimate its potential. And this all again shows that a lot of the people that ended up in the hospital were foreign, thinking it's just like weeds because it's legal and it should be casual. They ingest it casually. Actually, well, I'm a big fan of Hamilton Morris, but I thought it was really weird that in his documentary, he like had some truffles and then walked around on King's Day. That's like the worst moment. That's way too casual, but maybe that's his intention, and his intention was to uphold or preserve or just watch these crazy Dutch people do their thing. And then there's also the educated purchases, wherein people just go to a random smart shop. The smart shop just wants to make money. They want to make a bread and butter for their family, and they don't ask enough questions. And then you have people with a history of psychiatric diseases buying these substances and not taking care of set and setting. For example, going to a club or being drunk. And there's actually a lot of these solutions that were found to these problems. But first, this happened. So in 2007, a 17-year-old French girl with known psychiatric issues somehow during a school trip got her hands on these mushrooms and unfortunately killed herself. There's a lot of story around this. She definitely also had a lot of alcohol in the system, and some sources differ, but like one of the sources I've read also mentioned cocaine and the other sources didn't. But the one thing that everybody knows certain that she, in the weeks before, she already thought about ending her life and then decided in an intoxicated state in a school trip also to take these mushrooms. Apparently one of her parents, her mom, was a politician. She's like, my daughter would never do this. And what happened is ended up a really big lawsuit against the state of the Netherlands, wherein the state of the Netherlands had to make a decision. What are we going to do? So what was recommended is the Job Cohen at the time was the mayor of Amsterdam. He recommended you buy the mushrooms, then you wait 3 days, and then you can come pick them up. And this way you don't have any of these impulse purchases, which has always been the issue with the people and like getting into the hospital or having serious issues. More education before purchase. So some people claimed a test or a little quiz or even for salespeople to really do not sell anything of these powerful substances to people that might not be ready. And some people even discussed a mushroom license. I think it was Timothy Leary's initial idea to have drug licenses. So you just like a driver's license, you do a test and then you're allowed to buy a substance. But the RIVM, I just don't know how to translate that, but like it's basically the Dutch health institution. They recommended to not ban the sales because it's a safe substance and a lot of people find benefit in this. Unfortunately, they did not listen. And what was put in place is there was a ban on sales and cultivation of 200 species of magic mushroom. Change in the law specifically stated the mushroom, so there was no change in the law naturally occurring psilocybin. So what people did, they figured out a loophole in the law, and that became the magic truffle. And magic truffles are not mushrooms, they're sclerotia formed of the mycelium that definitely still contain psilocybin and psilocin, which are the active compounds, or some of the active compounds in these mushrooms. Some of the mushrooms that can create these truffles you can see here. A lot of these are very like exotic variations, but the main ones being Tampenensis, Mexicana, and Hollandia that are being cultivated these days. And this process takes a long time. This takes 3 to 6 months. It's tedious, and it's not what the organism wants to do. The organism wants to grow that beautiful mushroom, so we can just spore out the spores. And now you're probably thinking, wait, wasn't this a talk about like cultivating mushrooms? Yes, but there is a talk about the importance of cultivation of mushrooms, because what came into place besides the magic truffles are the magic mushroom grow kits. And the magic mushroom grow kits are also legal to sell. So they basically are selling mycelium on grain or on a substrate that then the user has to figure out how to turn into mushrooms. And then that side is not being talked about because that's not what the smart shops are selling. But like I've never known anybody being prosecuted for cultivating their own sacred mushrooms from one of these magic mushroom grow kits. Why
Hey,
this
Jasper,
is yes.
Sorry, we got a couple questions. Let's get to. So
Yeah,
just
please.
first off, before we stray too far away from it, somebody asked, "What is the name of the lounge that you showed us in the Netherlands?"
It's called Kokopelli. That's Kokopelli. It's one of the oldest smart shops in the Netherlands. Fantastic people, so much knowledge, so good vibes. Yeah, I highly recommend it.
Cool. So that's one, Kokopelli, right?
Yes.
And the second question is, truffles contain a low amount of psilocybin or a less amount of psilocybin than mushrooms, correct? By about what rate? Maybe you can touch on that.
This differs on many skills because often when we talk about like mushrooms, we talk about dried mushrooms, and fresh mushrooms, there's about 1-to-10 ratio. So if you want to have 2.5 grams of dried mushrooms, you need to grow 25 grams of fresh mushrooms. And with psilocybin containing truffles, you get about the same result at 15 grams as in like 2 grams to it's a little more potent, but apparently there's no base cysteine in it. And again, this is like one paper I found. There's some other papers that say something differently, but in my experience, there is something a little off about the truffle. And the story that I tell myself is because it is it's not what the organism wants to do. It doesn't want to create this sclerotia. It's a panic move. It's like, oh, it's dying. There's no more food. I need to make like nutrients for later when food arises. So there is definitely not enough research on this because like the only country in the world really that grows truffles on a large scale is the Netherlands, and more testing needs to be done.
Cool. And one more question. And again, this is interactive, so don't hesitate if anyone has a question, because Jasper's the person to ask. Someone mentioned that they've had a wide array of experiences with psilocybin mushrooms, and some have been very clear and deeply profound. Some have been more fuzzy and drunk-like. And because the mushrooms that you can buy, including from maybe some of these smart shops, they don't always come with labels or information about what strain or what species they are. So the question is, if you can talk a little bit about the range of experiences, what might be attributable to being a psilocybin cubensis mushroom, or what might be a different mushroom that might occasion a mystical experience, just so whoever wants to know, they know when they're asking about, trying to find some magic mushrooms, some sacred mushrooms, that they know what to ask for and maybe some of the differences of what they might get. If you could touch on that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So most of the names that you'll probably be hearing is the golden teacher, be positive, albino penis envy. Those are all these guys over here. And these are psilocybe cubensis. That's all one species. I am of the narrative that all of these varieties or strains, like people like to call them, they're not that different in the experience. They're mainly visibly very different. So they look very different. But in my experience, what is way more important is how they've been grown, what substrate, what is the genetic, how healthy, how vibrant are the genetics. I really think that all these other names around it are mainly marketing. And that is from my personal experience. I prefer mushrooms from the wild because they have character and they've fought against the natural environment and they've done their little dance in the wild. But there's a difference between the different species in experience. And it's actually a good timing to ask this question, because here, I don't know if you see my mouse, but here you see Degenaars cyanescens, used to be Copelandia cyanescens. And this is a very different species, which gives a very different effect. A lot of people find it lighter. People have less challenging experiences. This goes the same for Psilocybe mexicana. People find it to be more welcoming and warming and engaging. And in some traditional cultures, they even call Psilocybe cubensis the white man mushroom these days. So any of the strain names, Psilocybe cubensis, by far the most easy to cultivate mushroom, like with oyster mushrooms, and that's the 2 mushrooms I'm going to be focusing on. And then there's a ton of different species. like the Netherlands banned 200 different species of psilocybin-containing mushrooms, including ones you cannot cultivate, like Psilocybe semilanceata or the Liberty cap, and all very different experiences. So I'm going to actually continue for a little bit again. Thanks for all the questions. So why grow mushrooms? There's actually, I find like there's 5 good reasons why to grow mushrooms, and they are quite large. Connect to our ancestors is one of them. It's a very ancient practice, and we've been working and communing with these mushrooms for a very long time. Building a multifaceted skill set is another one of them. And growing mushrooms helps you to grow yourself, creating a network of food security, and connect to your food and your medicine. So I'm going to go into the history a little bit. So here we have some cave paintings that have been found in Algeria, which have been dated 9,000 to 10,000 years ago. And here on the left, we see an anthropomorphized mushroom shaman doing a little dance. And on the right, we see the mushroom bee shaman, probably because fresh mushrooms, you don't have a way to dry them. They stay very well in honey. So if you find the Psilocybe cubensis or in any other dung-loving mushroom grow from cow dung, you want to store it so you can enjoy it for as long as possible. Honey is the one preservative that they may have had in the ancient world. And like, who knows if they were cultivating. But if we look here, this is a picture of a hieroglyph in Egypt. We see a lady holding a bag with mushrooms coming out of it. And although this has never been stated as the first evidence of mushroom cultivation, I think it doesn't take too much to figure out that if you see a big fleshy mushroom growing out of cow dung, that then if you want more of those mushrooms, or if you want to take those mushrooms home, you just have a linen bag, you put the cow dung in, and you maybe spray it, you hang it up somewhere, and more mushrooms will grow. Maybe you put some more cow dung in where no mushrooms have gone out of, and maybe some of the times this will have success. Mushrooms in Egypt were always seen as sacred. Some of the researchers I've read mentioned that only the royalty were able to eat and consume or even touch these mushrooms. So they had a very interesting way of going about this. And of course, the Mayan. So these are the Mayan mushroom stones, and the Mayan consumed up to 53 different species of psilocybin-containing mushrooms. And again, there's so many different ones, and some of them are actually quite manageable to cultivate, although there's no direct record of. And the Mayan peoples, they were they're not the same. Like Dennis is in Chiapas, and those Mayan people are very different than where normally my home base is in Lake Atitlan, Guatemala. So it's even that much that across the lake, they speak different languages. But in general, they had this profanity or this idea that mushrooms were sacred and an epiphany, and that's why they call it Teotl Nanakatl, the flesh of the gods or divine flesh. And even the Mexica, which is the name that the Aztecs called themselves. The Aztecs is actually a derogatory term made up by a German guy in the 1800s. But they had, I cannot pronounce this guy's name, but it's named the Flower Prince, and he was a god of the mushrooms. And they like to consume mushrooms together with cacao, like a lot of hippies like to do these days at festivals. Mushrooms, cacao. Only difference is that they also would ritually sacrifice people. But for the rest, the festivals are very much the same. But this is the mushroom that they could have potentially cultivated, Psilocybe cyanescens, or the wavy cap. It's a saprophytic mushroom. It likes to grow on wood chips, and it grows so much that it's actually being radically inoculated in all spaces in the world, like the west coast of the United States, where people have been spraying liquid culture, and it's something we get to in a bit on wood chip piles. And this mushroom has been detected and seen more and more in the Netherlands, where I'm at right now. And I don't even know if they occur naturally, but people have been spreading them. To move away a little bit from the sacred mushroom, shiitake is named after the log that it grows off. So take is kind of the word for mushroom in Japanese, and shi is the name of the tree that's kind of an oak apparently, and it will fall down. And there's actually 2 different ideas behind it. There's some sources that claim that first mushroom cultivation happened in Japan in 1800 years ago. And how they would do it is they would find these fallen mushroom logs. And again, the samurai sometimes protected these logs so common people wouldn't pick them. And then they would drag back the logs to their camps. So they would be able to harvest those mushrooms year after year. And then some people figured the same trick out that maybe those Egyptians had figured out what if I just put some fresh logs next to those logs, and then we might have success? And then some people even started hammering the bark, so the bark would break open, and potentially the spores or the mycelium of the mushroom could enter this fresh bark and create more mushrooms. This wasn't that successful though, so it was more of a trial and error, but in a way you can call it an archaic form of cultivation. And then we get to about 300 years ago. Actually, the first written evidence of shiitake cultivation comes from China, of the Qing dynasty, is like 1200 AD. But 300 years ago, people figured out a really consistent way of cultivating mushrooms in Paris, in France. They figured that if you had composted manure and straw, and you put them in these, like you have naturally occurring agaricus by spores growing out of those piles. Some people figured out that if you make these lines, as you can see in the picture here, under the case, because they would mine the limestone that they used for buildings, and this created these massive catacombs under Paris that then they would use to grow these mushrooms in a very consistent basis. Again, only by moving the mycelial mass of the compost substrate to more of this mycelial mass, and then it just starts growing. It's very archaic, but this was way more efficient than this old school shiitake cultivation. Then we get to 1893, when the first book on mushroom cultivation appears. Great title, so original. Mushrooms, how to grow them. Perfect. What do you need to know more? I've never read this book. I actually just it came up during my research, and I thought it was really funny to share that this is the first book on mushroom cultivation, and that a lot of people apparently found use to grow agaricus mushrooms in their backyard with their own compost. And then in 1972 or 3, we obviously have the psilocybin magic mushroom growers guides by Terence and Dennis McKenna. And Dennis, I think, is also speaking at this conference. It's funny, I saw this book when I was 18, and Os is a village that's really close to where I grew up. So I always felt like connected to this book in many ways. And this was revolutionary because it gave access to a lot of people to this knowledge of growing this Psilocybe cubensis mushroom, the easiest cultivatable magic mushroom in any home in the world. Then, in one of the primary Bibles, I think it was the beginning of the 80s, we had this book, The Mushroom Cultivator, a practical guide to growing mushrooms at home by Paul Stamets and Jeff Chilton. And I love Fantastic Fungi. I think it's done great. But when they talk about this book, they just cut out Tread Cutter saying Jeff Chilton. And I think this man needs some praise as well, because he worked at the first shiitake cultivation farm in North America, in the West. He's been cultivating mushrooms since the 70s. And yeah, he's very generous with his time. He has lots of podcasts where he shares a lot of his knowledge. And somehow his conflict with Paul Stamets has put him on the underground. But this man gets great extracts and knows a lot about the ways that the Chinese are currently cultivating a lot of organic mushrooms. And I kind of want to do a little shout out to Hippie3, who in 2003 came up with the airport lid method that made liquid culture accessible to all homestyle cultivators. He passed away in 2009. He was kind of not so liked, but he made homestyle mushroom cultivation a lot easier. And this is what I'm going to explain a little bit. Dennis, can you just nod if you can see my mouse move? Yeah? Okay, great. So before we go into a little bit more of the mushroom cultivation jargon and stuff like this, I want to just quickly go over the mushroom life cycle. So mushrooms are not plants. They are their own queendom in the walk of life. And very roughly, for the fungi that produce mushrooms, because not all fungi produce mushrooms, only two, Basidiomycota and Ascomycota. And we often just talk about Basidiomycota. Ascomycota are like cordyceps and truffles. So when we talk about cultivating psilocybe mushrooms, ones that contain psilocybin, often we talk about Basidiomycota. So I'm going pretty fast. Let's all meet on exhale and inhale deeply. So every time we do this, we inhale about like 100 spores. And so mushrooms produce a lot of spores, and that is one of their ideas to success. So these spores, they land on fertile substrate, and substrate is the word for a growing medium, but also the food source. And then they germinate and form hypha. And the hypha is one singular strand. Then somehow telepathically, they know where other hyphae are, and they form mycelium, which is the network, which is the main body of the fungus. And when the time is due, they will work together to form a mushroom, which is the fruiting body. So it's like not the last body. So if you're in the forest and you find a mushroom, don't be thinking that you're gonna destroy the organism. You're just picking the fruit off the tree. You're just eating the raspberry from the bush. You can easily pick them. And actually, more and more research is showing that you're actually helping the organism when you pick it, because then you spread the spores further. And then here on the right, we can see what we can do with this information in the cultivation process. So we can start with a mushroom. That's obviously the fruiting body. And then we have two options. We can make a spore print or a spore syringe, or we can do a tissue culture, because a mushroom is actually made out of mycelium. And it's just a very dense and structured form of mycelium. But because it's the same body and it's still living, we can cut out a little piece of the core. That's why you see that this mushroom is cut open, and move it into a sterile container like an agar petri dish, and continue working with these genetics in this form. And we can do the same with a spore syringe. Most people in the United States, they will probably start cultivating with a spore syringe, because since the spores of Psilocybe cubensis do not contain psilocybin, they are completely legal. And although you have to put, I think, a little tag for microscopic use only on the syringe, a lot of people have found great success this way. And we see this petri dish kind of as the epicenter, because with this you can do everything. You can make more, you can make liquid culture, like what I kind of described from our friend Hippie 3. And liquid culture is just water with a little bit of honey that is sterilized, and sterilized means that it's void of all life. And you can, with this airport lid I talked about, you can move the substrate of the liquid substrate from a sterile container to a jar with sterilized grains, for example, without having to have a steel airbox or a clean container. Because I just mentioned there's so many spores, right? Well, we have to make sure that if we want a culture, and when we talk about a culture, it means is one organism in a substrate. So there's no bacteria or there's no other fungi in there. So if we want to move a culture to a sterile culture, or a sterile substrate without using an expensive flow hood or lots of spraying of alcohol, then this is a really easy way to do this at home. And if you have liquid culture, it's also referred to as liquid gold, you can make as much mushroom spawn as possible. And spawn is the golden grail. If you have the spawn, you can make as many mushrooms as you want. Like the grow kits I showed before, you can even grow mushrooms straight from the mushroom grain spawn. And with that, you can make a mushroom grow kit. A lot of people use a monotub, which is just a box. Some people use a bag. And if that gets contaminated or done, you can also grow them outside. And this is how a petri dish looks like. This is the epicenter. And this is a really beautiful, healthy, vibrant mycelium. And this is these lines, these veins that you're kind of seeing is very, very a clear classification of Psilocybe cubensis, or at least a Psilocybe mushroom. And you can define the mushroom based on the mycelium often. And this kind of growth is called rhizomorphic. So this is what you're trying to grow for, like a really strong root-like structure. And then you can get this after the grain spawn I talked about. And if you can see here, you can see on the floor, you see all this fluffy stuff. Well, that's the main body. And all these guys, these alien motherfuckers shooting out over it, those are the mushrooms. And they produce more spores. And these are the parts of the organism that want to interact with us. They're like, here we are, eat us, work with us. Well, time is flying. I actually thought I didn't have enough time, so I need to rush through this a little bit more. So we start with building a multifaceted skill set. If you control the power of mycelium and can cultivate mycelium, you can also work on mycofiltration, mycoremediation, and mycoconstruction. So this is Paul Stamets's mycofiltration setup. This is done with Stropharia rugoso-annulata, which is called the garden giant or the winecap mushroom. And the good thing about this winecap mushroom is that it's able to feast on E. coli, and the water flows through these bags. And maybe there's like a cow field up here and the cow shit and it ends up in the ditch. you don't want this in your water. So the water filters out, you give it to the mycelium. With any luck, mushrooms will grow from here, but the mycelium is actively hunting for these E. coli. Then this is another setup, and I think this is also a Stropharia rugosa or like King Stropharia. And here they pump water in these tanks. And again, here is some probably straw, myceliated straw, and it just slowly sips through these multiple layers of buckets. And here they probably catch the clean water where it is filtered. And this is really new, and a lot of people are experimenting with this. I've seen like big metal boxes filled that you can kind of easily fill out where you force your water of your river stream through. But there's a lot of room for experimentation and learning, and that's one of the cool things about mycology, that there's so much to learn. And this is basically the mushroom. This is the mushroom I actually found last Monday or Sunday or something at my friend's property. They grow massive, they're delicious, you can eat them, and they can support corn growth, and they can also filter out water from E. coli, which is pretty useful if potentially at one point the whole world burns down. I'm an optimistic guy, so I don't think it will happen, but like that you can filter your own water with mushrooms you've grown yourself. So there's another mushroom that can filter out water, and that is the oyster mushroom of the species Pleurotus. And they actively hunt for nematodes. So this is actually, I'm very happy that this photo is credited, but the hyphae kind of make this weird lasso and then wait for a nematode to pass through it, which is this tiny worm-like creature, and then it constricts and it eats the nitrogen of this little nematode. So they're cowboy hunters. And a lot of parasites are also nematodes that we do not want in our water and in our system. Going over oyster mushrooms, we talked about myco-remediation, and I think this is also Paul Stamets' experiment, where there was a big oil spill and people didn't know what to do with it, and he decided to just add a ton of magic mushrooms, I think it was straw spawn, grain spawn, on top of it. And those oyster mushrooms didn't care that this oil was all weird and full of heavy metals. They just grew and they just started eating the carbon that was present in the oil. And look at how happy they are. There's so many, they're massive. But because they were grown in an oil spill, you probably don't want to eat them because they are bioaccumulative. I can't say this word, but you know what I mean. They absorb all things in their environment and also the heavy metals that are present in the oil. But because it's consumed, they will probably break down a bunch of these heavy metals. Then insects will be attracted to the mushrooms and eat the mushroom, which then would hopefully break down some more. Then birds or any other preying animal will be attracted to the insects. And this way it is not discondensed and we can clean up oil spills. That's one way of mycoremediation. But then there's this guy. What's this? So fungi some of them are also single cellular. I think this is actually not specifically single cellular. No, those are tree cells, but they're tiny and they don't form mycelium as we know it, like kind of like yeast. Although we have a culture of it, and it does kind of look like mycelium. But this is Pestalitopsis microsporae, and this is attributed to being able to solely survive on polyurethane plastic. So plastic, pretty soft plastic, but it can completely break it down and consume it. So imagine a world where we just have massive trash piles of this plastic and we just inoculate this guy on top of it and let it go to feast. Right now, the process is kind of slow, but we can propagate cultures and make this process go faster. And hopefully polyurethane plastic is a thing of the past, or at least the trash or the waste thereof, because we can just give it back to nature and they will break it down in more easily accessible compounds for other organisms. Then we have myco-construction. So I got to give my shout out to Bob Hendricks of Loop Biotech, Dutch guy as well. And he came up with this mycelium coffin made out of reishi mycelium. And reishi mycelium and most hard wood-loving species, they contain a lot of chitin, so they're really tough. And even the mycelium is really tough. If you are cultivating this mushroom on an agar petri dish, sometimes your scalpel can't cut through reishi. That's how tough it is. And there's like almost no layer on top of this. So this is a great, beautiful way to tell a story of our death not having to be something that we want to separate from nature, but to become one with nature another time. But you can also build buildings. Like this person built a building And often this doesn't happen by baking the mycelium, so it doesn't grow mushrooms and deteriorate after a while. But you can also make packaging material. People are making surfboards. There's recently a company came out with a mycelium yoga mat. Maybe you guys have heard of mycelium leather. We're just scratching the surface here. This is all very new technology and the very new alliance of working with these technologies and these mushrooms and these beings. And the cool thing is, if you know how to grow mycelium, you can experiment with this yourself. You can make an ashtray yourself, for example, or you can make bricks, and you can potentially even try to build your own house. And maybe you come up with a beautiful technology or innovation that will change the world forever. And that's another time, the cool thing about the field of mycology. So there's obviously this beautiful picture of us getting together with mushroom cultivation. And now I have not put the title on top of it. So I'm like, grow mushrooms to grow yourself. This is a little bit better to look at. So my mushroom cultivation process has actually been something super beautiful on my own personal growth. And we made this flyer in combination with our friend Charlie of Ethical's Journey. And I think it embodies really beautifully like the beauty and the science and the art that is mushroom cultivation. So be clean, think ahead, be in the moment, be patient. Obviously, you have to have a contradiction in terms in your speech, and understand that mistakes are essential. So if you're clean, if you're working in the lab all day, you're spraying 70% alcohol and hydrogen peroxide perhaps to eliminate all chance of contamination. And often you do this in a steel air box, like you see here. You can also use a HEPA filter, which is a flow hood, but you want to spray everything and be meticulously clean. I used to not be a clean person. I used to have a messy room, and then I would work in the lab all day. Everything is clean, and then I come back to a messy room. It just felt weird. So I stopped doing that, and I, not always perfectly. Hey, nobody's perfect, but I kind of stepped up my game regarding this. Then think ahead. It's really important with mushroom cultivation that you're not just starting off because before you know it, you sprayed all your stuff and you forget a scalpel, and then you have to do it all over again. Or you forget that you have this epic party planned, but your pressure cooker that needs to go for 90 minutes is going, and you can't go to this cool party, or you have to turn off your pressure cooker. Like planning ahead is really important, and the reason why I've used this is a beautiful image of a permaculture system with intention of mushrooms in mind, and I think permaculture embodies thinking ahead really beautifully as well. And then the contradiction in term: don't hate, meditate, or be in the moment. When you're working with a sterile culture, like you open a petri dish and you know how fragile it is. There's nothing else going in your mind. You're just completely present and you're completely working with it, and you're completely with that mycelium and the organism. And often when you start thinking about other things, the mycelium, I feel it knows. And it's like, you're not worthy, and it gets contaminated. But the more you're present, the more you give your energy and your love to this organism and work with it and are present with it, the more success you're going to see. So mindfulness in the lab or grow room, however you want to call it, has been, I'm always just so present and there. And that comes with a range of amazing benefits like decreased stress, enhanced ability to deal with illness, facilitation of recovery, decreased depressive symptoms, and all of these things. And that also comes alive with seeing that success. But success is not always what we have, because patience is needed first. A lot of people are not so patient, and especially with mushrooms, you know they're growing fast, but you kind of want to look at them every day. And sometimes, especially in incubation stage, they want to be left alone. They want to incubate, and they just want to chill. And that's also why I decided not to have a picture here, because we don't always have to do the thing. Sometimes we just have to let it be and let it do its thing and trust that the organism will find its way. And sometimes it doesn't. And we have to understand that mistakes are a crucial part of this system. And with more than 40% of millennials having the fear of failure, I think consistently being thrown in this field of mycology where mistakes happen all the time. I always see it that like we're just trying to reduce contamination. Yes, if you have a commercial grow, you kind of want to have that to zero. We're not there. We're also in the jungles of Guatemala. There's a lot of competition in organisms. It's really hard to get the right equipment. It's all right to fail. And I think the mushroom and the cultivation of mushrooms will teach you that, because then you learn from next time. And here before, but this I would just touch all of you. For example, this one was opened too early. The mycelium has not completely colonized the substrates, and then you get sad little mushrooms. And there's so many things. This guy had some contamination. This guy had some contamination, but still, for a failure, it was a pretty good failure. Then, another reason why more people should grow mushrooms is we can create a network of food security everywhere. So we're not talking about the psilocybin mushrooms for a second, but we're talking about oyster mushrooms. And coming in, working in Guatemala, there's a lot of people that encounter hunger in their lives. But there's this epic waste product. You see this? This is chilote. It actually is the corn cob. So they harvest the corn off the cob. And then what do you do with cob? Maybe you give it to a pig or something, but there's still so much left. Oyster mushrooms love it. And this is Tomasa. She's our neighbor. She's actually wrapping the beautiful colors of her little village, Sununa. And this is how Mayan women identify themselves and where they're from. And yeah, she has been growing oyster mushrooms for quite a long time. And she's doing this by getting spawn from a town pretty far away. And we're actually right now setting up a system to supply her with spawn and empower her to teach other local women to grow oyster mushrooms in their home. Because oyster mushroom cultivation is actually perfect for everybody, especially in this day and age where a lot of people are working from home. But if you want to have to look after your kids, mushroom cultivation is a lot of waiting. And she just got this epic chopping machine and her workload is cut in half. It's fantastic. And this way she can feed her family, but also sell these mushrooms to white people that want to purchase these mushrooms for a lot of money. And she loves what she does. And she's a mushroom cultivator at heart. And we want to spread this. So I want to bring light to this epic project, Eco Agaric in Uganda by Josephine Nakananda. And she's teaching local women in Uganda how to cultivate these mushrooms from, I think they're using sugarcane waste. And they steam pasteurize. So Tomasa uses a different form of pasteurization. She's steam pasteurizing them. And she's right now, with the help of Mike Tyson, shout out MYC Tyson, not Michael the boxer, growing these mushrooms and growing the spawn of these mushrooms and empowering these women to create their own food and their own abundance in their lives. And this also is happening in India. And you see 3 different continents and 3 different ways of growing oyster mushrooms, because here they grow on straw, but very similar methods are applied. And this can also happen in Jamaica, where they grow on lemongrass at this specific organization, I believe. And you don't have to have a far away from your bed show or not speak English or anything, because we can use waste products in our Western world. This is Blanc de Riz. I think they're in Montreal, and they grow oyster mushrooms from coffee grounds that are wasted so much in our city lives, and wasted beer grains. And a similar organization is doing the same thing in the Netherlands. They're called Rotterzwam. Zwam is the Dutch word for a mushroom. And they actually have this amazing grow kits that people can feed their own coffee grounds from their own coffee consumption addiction into these little buckets, and then they can grow their own oyster mushrooms. So the main thing that I want to get across in this talk is this connection that we want to feel to this organism. It's not just a thing that we want to purchase and consume. It's alive, it's conscious. We want to commune with her and them, basically. It's always plural with mushrooms. And we want to create this connection. We want to create this, I think it's more of a symbiotic relationship than a relationship of consumption. And so for me, the ritual, the ceremony starts not when I ingest the mushroom or when I put my intention. For me, it starts when I first start working with mycelium. My friend Darren LeBaron even says it starts for me when I go to the store and buy the food source for the mushroom, because then you're already thinking with the organism, what do they want to eat? What do they like? Well, how can I serve them so they can help me out with whatever I'm dealing with? And just seeing them grow is already so much fun. That's how I got into it. I had my mushroom grow kit for the first time and I was just enthralled. And I know for Oliver it was the same. And seeing the amount of mushroom people right now in the Netherlands or anywhere in the world that first started because they saw this success and this amazing construction of these mushroom happening so fast, and then being able to work with the thing that you can put love in, that you can put your attention in, you can play it in the music that you like, you can talk to them. I think there's nothing that like a store-bought mushroom that can give you, like that a mushroom that you've handled it with love and care and intention yourself can give you, because it knows you. I actually had a video, and there's another cool time-lapse thingy. And this is one that we've cultivated ourselves. And again, it just shows how beautiful they are, doing their own natural process. And yeah, to me, there's nothing like it. There's no more joy to see these guys so happy. I just become happy with it. And then to be able, I can share this with the people I love, their healing potential and my personal healing journey, and even the laughters and the smiles. Like, recreational use is definitely also fun. Like, these organisms know that they can be funny, and funniness and enjoyment is part of what they want to give us. At least that's the message I'm getting. Can we go to the next one yet? So like I said, it starts with getting your equipment. Like, what do you need? You need a pressure cooker. You need something to keep them safe in. You need to work with the cultures. You need to propagate them. You need to give them love. These DNA, these genetics, they have their own will. And like, the more you give them, the more they give back to you. And this is the love that you want to put in this, because there's another way that this can go, right? There's, like I showed you in the beginning, this is the way it can go. Laughter. That's the eventual ascension of Oliver and this dog that I put in last minute. But the way that can actually go is this guy. Okay. Jokes aside. Enough dogs and mushrooms. This way, what we're seeing right now in the scene, so much, there's so many big organizations stepping up and just wanting to, just seeing these dollar signs in these mushrooms. They're looking at the cannabis industry and it's like, we made a lot of money here. What can we do the same? My friend just got offered a massive amount by one of the major corporations, and he hasn't even started yet. They're already trying to buy out with massive amounts of money these people that do it with love and care and attention. We cannot let this happen. Like, they will either mess up or fuck up this whole legislation business because they just do it out of intention. Nice one, Dennis. Just like always prepared. But this is a sacrament. How can we attach money to a sacrament? I just don't understand this. And I have some pictures of how it was done in the Netherlands when this was still legal to sell. Does this look like a sacrament to you? Or does this look like a cash crop? Nothing against this lady. I'm sure she's wonderful. But like, just seeing this, this doesn't feel right for me. And this is what's happening in the United States. Yes, some people might do it with great intention. Some people might want to spread this world magic and the mycelium and the love to everybody. And yes, cultivation is not as accessible, but like, the people that can cultivate, they can grow this much, not this much, but they can grow a lot of mushrooms for their friends. And the more mushrooms that they grow for their friends, they can share, like, if you grow one batch of mushrooms, you're not going to consume all of them yourself. And these kind of look happy. They get enough nutrients, but they feel dead to me. They have no, because they know that they're being cultivated as a cash crop. That's my intention. That's how I feel it. And I'm not in favor of this. But does this look like a sacrament? I think this looks way more like a sacrament. You see two happy people with their homegrown mushrooms. They're laughing. They have plenty of mushrooms. They can go on journeys. They can microdose. There's probably another flush coming out of this mushroom. They're fine. They're fine. And this, to me, feels way more like a sacrament. Look at this guy. He's our main cultivator, Henry, right now. This is a happy man with his mushrooms. And this is what it can give you. Happiness, a joy, a sense that you're working together with an organism in your environment, and not only using an organism for its potential benefit, or looking what it can give you, or how it can serve you. How can we give back? And I think cultivation is ultimately giving back to the mushroom, giving them what they want, more mushrooms and more spores and more people eating them so they can have more spores. That is just good. That is just like full on having a little, I'm just going to hold the microphone for now. I feel like it's going to be a little weird. Yeah, wow, that's better. And Dennis migrating in the rain. But yeah, I think this is the way forward. Like, let's grow more mushrooms. Let's help them out so they can help us out. I think it's a great symbiotic relationship that we can build with these organisms, and a lot of us already trying to build. And if you're ever curious, that's what you want to do. I didn't even mention this. I think with the system that Daniel sent up, I clicked or just did the thing that one of you guys that are watching are getting one of our courses for free. So I don't know, Daniel will figure out how this works, but that's the gift, and share the knowledge. That's what we're doing, you know, like this is common good. And the more people that are growing mushrooms, the better. The more we have this. Doesn't this make you happy? I'm kind of done right now, Dennis, but like this definitely makes me happy. Does it make you happy, Dennis? Oh, he's offline. He's like migrating. Anyhow, there's 1, 2, 3 people in there. Thank you, Psilocybin Summit. It was great talking about my passion and my love with you guys, and doing it for so many people that share that passion and that love in all senses. And I got a couple minutes to answer some questions. So since Dennis is migrating, I'll just do the thing. Are there any dangers with growing mushrooms at home? So if you have a very condensed room and you're only growing, like you have a growing room, especially oyster mushrooms, yes, you can go into that space all the time. You don't want to inhale that many spores all the time. But most mushroom are not toxic and they do not spread toxic molds. If you have mold on your mushroom, it's probably not the best thing to eat. I've done it and I've been fine. But there's no inherent danger whatsoever. If you, however, grow a saprophytic mushroom in a very wet condition, you can have oyster mushrooms on your logs. When is a bed contaminated? Does the whole thing need to be thrown away? You can just throw it outside. Like you saw in one of the pictures before, you can just also scoop out some of the contamination. But some people like to, just throw it outside and it will work. Nope, this is a long question. I'm not gonna answer this. Dennis, you're safe? Your wife helped you out? Okay, still not there. Well, if anybody else has a question, I'm going to just open the chat and see what's up. Entertaining, inspiring. Thank you. What kind of room do you need to grow in? The first time I did it was in my bedroom. Golden teachers, good luck, dude. Thank you. Thank you. You guys are great. So much love. Wow, I feel so appreciated. Are we on more messages?
Hey, I'm back. Are you all able to hear me right now?
Yes, Dennis.
That was amazing. I caught everything. I'm out in the highlands of Chiapas, and early afternoon tropical storm just moved in, and great for mushrooms, bad for computers. So thank you all for bearing with me.
You had a great background for a second there.
I loved it. Yeah. All y'all, I think I've got some more questions here. I'm not sure if Jasper just addressed them, but somebody wanted to know if there's any danger associated with growing mushrooms at home, like toxic mold, spore spreading, etc. Can you touch on that, Jasper?
I just did okay. In your migration. I just didn't click it.
Cool, I appreciate it. Well, yeah, Jasper is quite the captivating orator, as you all have just seen right now. And I encourage you all to go down, anyone who's able, and hang out with them at the Fungi Academy, as I have done myself, because there's just so much knowledge, so many passionate people there. And if you can't make it in person, you can join their global online courses, which I've also done.
Yeah, and otherwise you can just sign up for a newsletter and become part of the Fungi family and just like learn things about what's happening in the mycosphere. And thanks for bearing with us. We're already going over time. And thank you, Dennis, for hosting. Thank you so much, Andy, for just going at it. I'm so impressive. You were like, this is a full-on exercise for you.
Amazing stuff. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Jasper. And thank you for all of you for joining us. Totally forgot to mention at the beginning of but at the beginning, I do have a podcast, which Jasper has been on, including several of the people that he has mentioned. It's called Myco-preneur Podcast. Would love to have you join us. And I also want to invite you all to the Ozo room, and maybe Jasper will pop in there if he has time. But some of you may be familiar, some not. Office. It's the VR component of the conference. So there's a link at the top of the chat that Daniel dropped in. And if you follow that link, you can go to the Ozo virtual reality forum to interact with each other and with people.
Nice. Okay, Dennis, can you send me the link and I'll drop in for a second, okay?
Cool. Yeah, it's at the top. I'll send it to you, but it's also at the top of the chat for anyone who's looking. But I'll send it to you, Jasper.
Thanks so much, everybody. So much love.
Thank you all.